And we are live. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Bill and Ammon's Bogus Hangout. This is the West Coast edition of the Bogus Hangout. We're still trying to figure out what UK daylight savings time differences are while scheduling this event. YouTube and Google Hangouts don't seem to work together well with scheduling, which Doc alerted me to. How are you today, Doc?
I'm doing pretty good, thank you.
Could you introduce yourself?
Well, Doc Sheldon of Intrinsic Value SEO and Search News Central. And I specialize in technical SEO and running my mouth. Pretty good at that part. But I've just been trying to put out some fires here this week and taking care of some personal business, and got a couple of new clients I'm lining up, so getting all that finalized. So hopefully I'll be staying busy for a while.
Be a good way to start the year.
Yeah.
So, Tim, how are you today? Why don't you introduce yourself and tell us what you're up to?
I'm Tim Calling. I own a Servant's Heart Web Design and Marketing, and we work a lot with home health care, hospice, elder care related services, but we also work with other industries as well. We do a lot of local SEO work as a result of kind of the population of clients that we work with. We also build sites for clients when necessary and manage them, which reminds me that I am planning on going to WordCamp San Diego this weekend. I don't know if you guys are.
I was going to ask you about that if you were.
Yep.
I'm planning on being there. Yeah.
Yeah. I saw you there last year. Doc, are you going to come up for that at all?
Wasn't even aware of it. When is it?
WordCamp San Diego.
No, I say when?
Oh, this weekend, Saturday and Sunday in San Diego.
I have to think about that. It would be fun. It'd be nice to see it up there and see you both.
It would be a kick.
I've never been to a word camp before, but I understand that they can be pretty productive.
Yeah, I think so. What did you think, Bill, after the one you went to, the one that we both went to last year?
I was a little disappointed because I had applied to speak, and
doesn't matter.
I got told they had lots of people to choose from, and they made selections, and unfortunately, I wasn't one of them.
Are you still planning on attending this year, or?
I am attending, yes.
You know, this crowd tends to be more, I don't know, WordPress website building focused than they do SEO, oriented. So I think it's too bad that they didn't accept your proposal. It doesn't surprise me in a way because they're also, focused on site building.
I suspect that the selection committee invited friends to speak.
Yeah, there's a lot of that. There really is.
I wonder if they're going to be talking at all about Gutenberg. That would be interesting to learn a little bit more about.
I certainly hope so.
That's just around the corner, I guess. I'd sure like to know what's coming because it doesn't look like it's going to be an insignificant change.
No, apparently not. That's my story.
We have so many clients who use WordPress that it is a big, impactful change. Terry, how are you today?
Not able to follow this conversation. Yeah, I'm pretty good though.
Yeah,
they're in the playoffs. Jays are winning. Life's good. Pocket.
Figured you'd like that part, yeah.
Oh yeah. What this conversation was about WordPress, and I'm not sure what it like. Can you just give me a quick refresh?
Sure. This weekend they're having the WordCamp San Diego,
Okay.
and up until you joined us a few minutes ago, this was the West Coast edition of No Names Bogus Hangout.
Oh, okay.
Right. So we're all San Diego based.
Yeah. Didn't that kind of start as not like a WordPress thing, but a bloggers in general thing?
I went to a WordCamp 2006 with Neil Patel talking about SEO.
Oh boy.
Well, that would have been the last one I ever went to.
Well, he didn't know much about SEO at the time.
He still doesn't.
I didn't say that.
I only had 2 cups of coffee this morning, so I'm in a pissy mood anyway. I ain't going to hold back.
That was like me yesterday. I was not in a good mood.
You were not fit for human company, eh?
Oh, no. And I made the mistake of posting. I thought I got to tell Dave, you should take my privileges away sometime.
Yeah.
Well, so I don't know the whole long history of these, but I'm not sure, Bill, if you have the same experience or a similar one. This will be the third one I've been to. I've been to the last 2, and then this will be my third.
Mm-hmm.
The first one I thought was not really stuff I was interested in, but last time it was a fair amount of the tracks were. I'm not a developer, I'm not a coder, and I'm certainly not a designer. You don't want me anywhere near designing things to make them pretty. But I call myself a builder. I build websites out of components. I make no excuses for the fact that I tend to build sites for clients using Genesis as a platform, almost always, not always, with some kind of a child theme chosen from the Studio Press, Developer Pro Pack. There's one other that I also use sometimes, and then a bunch of plugins to add functionality as needed, and usually a whole bunch of custom CSS to make things the way that the client and I want them. But I build sites, so I'm looking for very practical advice at these things, not 32 esoteric ways to stuff entries into the database coded in Mandarin, I'm making up an example. So there were a lot of topics that were more familiar, more practical like that last time. I haven't looked at the agenda for this time. I'm going to do that on Thursday to plan for the event. So I'm hoping to see some good practical stuff this year. So.
When I was in Virginia, I was a member of a meetup group that was a small business bloggers meetup group.
Mm-hmm.
And it was pretty much a meetup I would go to and answer questions about WordPress and how to, in some cases, optimize for WordPress.
Uh-huh.
Because business owners wanted to know that stuff.
Yeah.
They want to know things like how do they get public domain images? How much attribution do they have to give for them? How do they use public data sources? I had an accountant who was there who was publishing an economic index every month that his clients would rely upon, and he was getting that from linked data. So it was good talking to people who used that type of information on that type of scale.
I think that those meetups are actually in some ways equally, if not even more useful because they tend to be kind of more, at least on a peer level, in my experience when I go to them. There's one in North County that met for quite a while that Chris Lemma ran. He's a pretty well-known figure in WordPress land. He lives in Encinitas, I think. I know in San Marcos, somewhere around there. And it was great. And then he got busy traveling all the time, and it kind of fell apart because he was the main one driving it. But I really enjoyed those. They tended to be more of Chris just lecturing on a topic related to WordPress, but he's a good speaker, and they were always interesting. And they you know what the thing is, that or going to a WordCamp, they make me think of other things. You know, interacting with people tends to perturb you to think of other stuff that's relevant because of the conversation you had, you know?
Yeah, Chris is the only guy that's speaking whose name I recognize. Of course, I don't run in WordCamp circles, so I'm sure that some of those people are pretty prominent there, but he's the only guy that I've ever heard of before. And I see he's speaking this weekend.
And he's good. He's very entertaining. He's a good storyteller.
Let's see if I can make it. That would be fun.
Are there tickets still available? I'm not sure.
That's what I'm checking to see now.
That's why I missed the one 2 years ago, because I was too late for tickets.
You know,
nope, no tickets.
Well, okay, so if you want to try to find tickets, you can go to the Advanced WordPress group on Facebook, and post and just say, "Hey, I'm looking for a WordCamp San Diego ticket. Who's got some spares to sell?"
There you go. What's the group name again? Advanced WordPress?
WordPress, yeah.
Yeah, I'm in that group. Okay.
Yeah. That actually grew out of the San Diego WordPress meetup, the one downtown. That's a good one. It's too far for me to go, but I've been once and it was great.
I think I'll drop a post in there right now.
Yeah. Anyway. But I really enjoy getting together in meetup type situations to talk about stuff like WordPress, because there's always something you can learn from somebody else.
I was talking to my niece this weekend, and she's trying to get into SEO. Doesn't have much background. I suggested that she look for meetup groups to go to start networking with people who might help her learn.
Where is she located? Is she back on the East Coast?
She's in Florida. Yeah.
Oh. There's probably more than one meetup there that she could consider, I bet.
Mm-hmm. I mean, the folks I'm working with now in North Carolina, I met them at a meetup group in 2007.
Ah, very cool.
Yeah.
Whether it's a formal meetup or just a group of people with common interests, that's always useful. I started the company that I have now because I was having lunch. My wife and I were having lunch with a couple that owned another company in the industry. We were in Los Angeles, and we just met up because we had some interests in common. We were both in the home care industry, and in that kind of a setting, you always end up talking about, well, how do you get business, right? And I was saying that we get more than half of ours, or we did in those days, from the internet. And they said, well, what you should do is start a company to do that for other home care companies. We'll be your first clients. That's how I started my company. Of course, I had the benefit of an existing sustainable profit bearing business to fund the beginning of the SEO business. But by that point, I had done that for a long time for our business and for some other things we were doing. So what's new with SEO?
Bill, we were having a discussion the other day about H tags. And yeah, they're laughing because I kind of was a little frustrated and started mocking them all because they didn't really understand how those things worked.
You weren't mocking me. I wasn't saying anything.
I know you're smart. It was about the how headings work, and I thought about it more today, right?
Right.
And thought, why have we as SEOs never thought, why would Google add weight to a heading? I've never heard that discussed. I have a theory, have gone on that theory for a long time, which is basically that in HTML2, I believe, I read where a title was supposed to be basically about what the page was about, and H2 was a heading for that, like a
section,
like a subtitle or something.
Subtitle, correct. And then each of the others after that were delineating blocks of structure, right?
So Google does have a patent that they talk about something they call semantic closeness.
Okay.
And the idea behind it is that if you have a list, an unnumbered list with a header at the top, every item in the list is an equal distance to the header of that list. So if your list is about Saturn facts, for instance, and your first item is the rotation around the sun of Saturn is a certain number of miles.
Right.
The size of Saturn compared to Jupiter is this number. Each of those items in that list are all about Saturn. They're Saturn facts. So they're an equal distance semantically to the header.
Right.
The item list.
Well,
So the same patent says the same type of thing about headings on a page, that all the content that's under a heading is equal distance to the heading.
Yep.
Okay.
And go taking that a little bit further too. When you put up a bulleted list, let's say you talk about some of the advantages of Ford over Chevrolet, and then even an unnumbered list, okay, they'll always look at that introduction before the colon, and you don't have to mention Ford in any of those bulleted items. They're all automatically going to be semantically tied to Ford in terms of analyzing your content. So, and I know that to be true because I've seen it happen. I've done it for years that way, and they always pick up those search queries, even though they have to build a composite of two different lines, one of the bulleted items and the introductory line, and they'll be highlighted in the SERP.
So every word on your page is equal distance away from your page title. And they're semantically related. So that, to some degree, is how headings work. It's connected to all the things that head.
Right. I was kind of thinking along the lines of that patent came out in
like 2011, something.
Right.
Yeah.
Headings, almost from day one, right?
Yeah.
Have been how, for lack of a better way, a way to leverage relevance on a page. Thinking, like, I always try and figure out why a search engine does something, because I always look at it as they're trying to solve a problem. In this case, they're trying to determine relevance, and knowing that different parts are probably worth are more valuable than other parts, right? And to me, the reason that heading tags and all the head parts under them have always been a way to leverage is because the HTML language told them that if a document is properly written, that's a good way to weight the relevance of that document to the. Does that make sense to you?
Absolutely. The hierarchy has always been critical in terms of relevance, and I just can't imagine that ever going away.
However, Doc, for me, I never felt that an H1 had more weighting than an H3. I thought they were all probably the same.
I've never really thought about it that way in terms of weight. I look at it like an H4 definitely needs to be relevant to the H3 under which, following hierarchical structure, and that H3 has to be relevant to the H2 under which it resides, and they all better be relevant to the H1 on the page. Okay.
Right.
I don't know, the fact that an H4 might have the same weight as an H1, I suppose it's possible. Over my pay grade,
That's the question that's why in SEO, they always said a page should have an H1 tag.
Yeah, absolutely.
But
so most website designers who create the information architecture on a page don't always do a tremendous job of including subheadings within larger headings.
I would even go so far as to say rarely.
It should be like a Russian nesting doll. The parts fit within each other.
Well, because in WordPress, you wouldn't know that you should put a heading there unless you actually understood HTML.
True. Now, here's a question for you. When somebody, for some reason, and this happens a lot on WordPress sites, doesn't have an H1, but they do have H2s and 3s, does Google then look at the H2 in the same light in which it would view the H1 if present, in terms of generally determining what's the context of this entire page?
Is John Mueller making videos the way Matt Cutts used to? Would he be the person asking that about?
This is the discussion that we've been having in Dojo, which we have some newer members, and I think I got frustrated that we were having this discussion.
No, I find that hard to imagine. I suspect that, like saying that the font size
I think back to elementary school and building outlines and construction paper and Roman numerals and stuff like that. And everything I learned that was important, I learned in kindergarten, right?
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, and if you didn't use that Roman numeral 1 at the top of that outline, and you started with a Roman numeral 2, was your teacher going to look at that as the same as a 1? No.
No.
So to me, it just doesn't make sense that it would be considered, in the absence of an H1, considered to replace the H1. I think that just probably is looked at from an HTML standpoint. How is it tagged? If it's tagged with this particular tag, this is the way we're going to look at it. If it's this particular tag, that's the way we're going to look at it. And we're not going to change that because you're too stupid to do it right.
So I've seen some sites where the page title is not. I've never really gone and double checked to make sure that it's actually getting marked as an H1 in the code, the source when it's presented, visually when it's rendered. I don't know if they all really do that.
They don't.
Still a little bit.
An H2.
I'm still a little bit pissed off going to Jeffrey Zeldman's website, and he's supposed to be a web standards guru, an evangelist for building standards for the web. And he wrote an article a few years ago retracting the idea that you would put your put your logo in H1s. And I visited his site recently, and there is his page logo on each page in H1s. And no search engine's going to read your logo. It's a picture.
Well, sorry, that ain't going to happen.
I mean, it's not
Interesting.
Well, he's also, you know, the one who said we should all have a menu down the left-hand side, so every website was the same. He was actually, wasn't he, a software designer and not a web designer before he got into the web.
not sure.
Yeah, that's why I never pay any attention to.
Some of the stuff he's said over the years has been pretty good.
You know, in the midst of this, let's go back to the H2 header for a moment. So I kind of volunteered the idea that it was a subtitle for the page, and nobody disagreed with that. But is that really the right way to use it? Like I tend to think of.
Sorry to cut you off, Tim.
That's right.
I actually, a long time ago, if you look up the RFC for HTML2, it describes the function of the H1 and the H2 tag.
Yeah.
And how the blocks under them work.
Okay.
Okay. Title of the page was your H1. Okay. Subtitle or headline, H2.
Okay.
Blocks under that were for
H3 and
delineate topics or whatever within the page, right? Blocks of ideas.
If you were to extract just the headings from a website, it should give you an outline.
Exactly.
Content outline. Correct them on. That's a
so
that's
just
a
interesting
analogy, Bill, actually.
Yeah.
So it's interesting. Between H1 and H2, there's a one-to-one relationship, but then between H2 and H3 and so forth, there's a one-to-many.
There's no connection between H2 and the ones under it. Those are almost like separate.
Well,
so
I would word that a little differently, Terry. I think, let's say that on a page you're talking about cars. You know, a typical car configuration might be this page title, and you have an H2. You could have an H2 that deals with drivetrain, okay? Then an H3, which is engine. Another H3 below that, which is a transmission. Another one which below that, which is third member, okay? And then another H2 that deals with body style, okay? And then an H3 which is sedan, another H3 which is coupe, okay? You know, so that's hierarchical. And like Bill put it, a beautiful way of saying it. Extract all those headings, and you've got an outline of the page. This
is the conversation I wanted to provoke. Is it ever appropriate to have more than one H2 on a page then?
Absolutely.
No, not my, okay.
This is what I wanted to hear.
In HTML5, yes. Okay, they've changed how those things work. To me,
in HTML5, they allow multiple H1s.
Yeah.
H1 too.
But
oh my gosh.
But the older version
was only one H1.
When you had an H1, you could have a couple of different H2s under it.
Yeah, in HTML4, for instance, you could definitely have multiple H2s.
Oh, okay. I guess I quit reading those things out.
So in HTML5, if you can have multiple H1s, then is there something like a title attribute that is even
those things become meaningless to me.
I wonder, yeah.
That takes
HTML5 breaks the page up into segments
or sections.
Blocks.
I think they refer to them as segments.
Oh, okay. I thought I've seen section.
Maybe sections, but they have like and a side section.
Oh,
So,
okay.
so if H1 is no
You
longer,
have a main topic and H1 topic of each section. So each section could have an H1.
Right.
so what is the name of the identifier that's even higher than an H1 that identifies
Title.
the entity?
It's
Okay.
only the title now in the H.
That's what I was wondering. Is it title
Now,
in HTML5?
So if you want to go on the structured data version of this, they've got something called a main entity of page.
Yeah, that's right.
They've got another schema that's an about.
well,
So your page could be about certain things.
And I was thinking the other day that main entity on page is something I want to go back and start adding to a whole bunch
Yeah.
of pages.
Yeah, maybe so.
that brings up the idea too, especially when you pre HTML5. For instance, on SNC, our lead page is essentially a blog page that has 10 of the most recent posts on it.
Yeah.
Each one of those, besides having its featured image, also has its title, which is also an H1. So I got 10 H1s on my homepage.
And Microsoft did come out with the patent that talked about block level page rank and block level topics.
Wow.
So your blog post with 10 articles on it is like a newspaper.
Yeah.
With 10 different headlines.
Exactly.
And you have 10 different block level subjects.
Which under HTML5 would be perfectly legitimate and would make sense. But under HTML4, I'm not so sure that is going to be.
Except on the front page of the New York Times, it's perfectly acceptable to have 5 main topics of that page. They're
Perfectly acceptable in whose eyes?
in most newspapers' eyes.
Well, in newspapers, certainly.
Right.
But I'm talking about online. I mean, I wonder, does the fact that my homepage has 10 H1s on it, since HTML5 has not been officially adopted yet, does that create a problem for me? No, I'm still able to rank that homepage.
So the HTML needs to reflect the reality of what people are publishing.
You would hope, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm just saying that I think those kinds of headings will have they'll be leveraging things differently.
Yeah, you'd think, yeah. They'd have to. Sure.
In the past.
Yeah, they'd have to, because they're losing an awful lot of their teeth.
Well, we know that both Microsoft and Google are doing page segmentation, where they are able to tell different parts of pages and the fact that they cover different content. Do you remember doing SEO in the early 2000s, where sometimes you would put the phrase that you want to optimize the page for partially on one part of the page and partially on another part of the page, and search engine would connect them together?
Never tried that, no.
Never tried that.
I'm not sure that I ever saw that.
Where do you mean, like, kind of, it didn't have to be an exact phrase match as long as the 2 parts of it? I believe that since whenever, like forever. I believe that.
So you're talking about splitting a long tail between, let's say, the content and the sidebar?
Yeah.
Not so much the sidebar, more the content within it.
Okay, yeah, I've seen that and done that, within the content block, sure.
Now maybe it doesn't quite work as easily.
I think they're looking at that differently. They're looking to pull entities from that now and look for co-occurrence.
Yeah.
Geez, Bill, I feel smart today.
You're just gonna get spoiled with Bill agreeing with you, Terry.
Yeah, I know. Get a big head.
Yeah, the entity extraction is interesting. Google is definitely moving in that direction.
Well, now that I'm kind of trying to wean myself off WordPress and just copy it. Like now I just buy a theme so I get the stuff I need and then I build it in on yeah, and I can remove all the crap and it's like astounding. Talking not a few lines of code, but even when I write code, and this is why I really like it. For the mobile, I can get the exact sizes, everything I want. So I'm not putting, 1,000 wide image, by this into this later on by just changing the dimensions and still downloading.
Right.
That's what I like. And it's very hard to get a theme that's thought about things that much.
Well, this is true. There's when I finally gave up the ghost and decided to start learning to do some nuts and bolts coding, I was blown away by how crappy some of the big name theme houses are.
None of them will validate. None of them, the HTML will validate.
No, I'm not anal about HTML validation.
Well, neither am I. I'm just saying it won't validate.
I leave that to my buddy Ed Lewis. I think he's anal enough for all of us.
Me and Ed being down that long road.
He's anal enough for all of us put together.
And the only reason why I bother to validate is because I know I miss stuff.
Yeah.
It's
I have found errors. Yeah.
Well, the browsers are so smart these days, Bill. Like, I remember when, like, at version 2 of Netscape, you could leave the HTML tags out and the page would still render.
Yeah.
The browsers figure out a lot of the stuff for you.
Well, that's the problem. Early on, I used to be able to find a problem, an error that I'd made because it didn't display properly. And now the browsers fix so much of that shit on the run that you can't rely on that. So I like using the validator for that because sometimes it'll say, "Hey, stupid, did you forget something here?"
Do browsers still have a compliance mode for when you mess up your HTML so much they're still showing it anyway?
I haven't seen that they have any compliance concern. I think that they spot obvious errors and fix them on the fly.
Yeah, they used to refer to it as a compliance mode. They would be showing your page in compliance mode.
Yeah, I haven't seen that in a long time.
Well, they didn't tell you; they just did it.
Well, I do recall getting some pop-ups like even early Firefox, and certainly in IE, where you get a pop-up when you had an obvious issue, or you just get a placeholder with a statement in it, But those days are kind of gone. Now, that's the only thing I use the validator for, because it has many times caught me in mistakes that I had made.
And I used to look at pages in different browsers just to see if they were showing the same content or not.
Forgetting to close a tag or something like that, but just like most of the browsers now, you forget to close a tag, they'll just close it for you. Idiot proof.
But the thing is, that can cause it to slow down because the browser I call it pre-renders and then renders. It kind of maps out the whole page and then renders it. So that doesn't work as well.
Yeah.
So it's trying to construct the DOM and will sometimes fill it in.
I was just looking to see if there's an extension for Chrome for compliance mode or something like that. I'm seeing lots of things called compliance, this and compliance that, but they seem to mostly be for SSL. Checking for SSL. By the way,
everything should be encrypted.
Yeah, that's there. So I just looked at the homepage for the New York Times, and they have no JSON schema code. It's all the other types. So I don't think that they have a use for the schema.org concept of main entity on page. So.
I haven't seen too many people that use it.
No.
I'm betting it's only people who are heavy into schema that use it.
So in some ways, I wonder how it's going for Google to try to get to the world to adopt schema.
And we'll sometimes fill it in.
Hi, guys.
Hi, Sarah.
Hi, I just wanted to go back to the H1 because
We're just looking to see if there's a
What do we got?
extension for Chrome.
I think we've
Turn
Like that. I'm not seeing. There's lots of things called compliance. This and compliance that, but they seem to mostly be for SSL. I remember saying that a few minutes ago.
Yeah. I think we might have a little lag.
listening to the video.
That's there. So I just looked at the homepage for the New York Times, and they have no JSON schema code at all. The types. So I don't think that they have a use for the schema.org concept of to the homepage.
Zara, do you have?
yeah, I have a question. I just want to get
seen
really,
too many people that use it.
really.
I'm betting it's only people who are heavy into schema
Do
that
you have YouTube going with a copy of this show?
So in some ways, I wonder how
You need to turn that off.
You need to stop the video, yeah.
to get to the world to
Stop
adopt.
the video so we can catch up to you in real time.
Okay, we're going to. Hi, guys.
Hi, Sarah.
Hi, I just wanted to go back to the
Maybe in another tab.
there. Let's do it.
Okay, I don't hear it. So what is your question, Sarah?
So I just wanted to double check with you because we were having a discussion in the comment section about multiple H1s on a page. So I was really excited to hear that in one way, because my understanding had been came down under that, and I've pretty much been training my clients to think that way, but now I can free up. So let me go back and let's use the outline as the example.
Looks like you froze up, Sarah.
And then if you have a second one on the same page, then from that point forward, all the H2, 3, 4, 5, 6 relate to that second H1. Is that correct?
Well, keep in mind the fact that the multiple H1s is under HTML5, which is not yet formally adopted.
Right.
And may or may not ever happen, you know, or at least soon. So I don't know that I would direct my efforts in that
Okay,
direction
cool.
yet.
That's thank you, Doc, because I was just curious because I've been pretty strict about having one H1 per page. and then everything fits under that. And then to expand, for me, my understanding of, that's why I hang out with you guys. My understanding of the H1 is it's like a signal to Google or search or whoever's looking that this is what the page is about. You know, even if somebody has a clickbaity title up above, H1 is the directive that says this is what the page is about. Is that correct?
If you think about a page slightly differently,
Okay.
like the homepage of a newspaper with multiple headlines and
Yeah.
stories, each story is as important as the one above it. They're individual storylines. They're individual segments or sections.
Right.
That's what HTML5 is approximating.
But let's go back to reality and what Doc was saying. We're not there yet in the real world.
We're there. Some places have adopted HTML5, but they're sort of ahead of the curve. They're
right. So
web.
Right. So for me, working with clients who aren't on the forefront,
there's also the correct use in HTML and what Google will do with it. As SEOs and web designers, that's always been kind of, it's balancing.
Right. Because it's like meta descriptions. Well, you can say what you have to say in your meta description, but Google may pick something else on the page. So it's kind of like the best we can do under the current circumstances. But anyway, I just wanted to get clear about the H1 and where we are with that, because of what I do, that putting headings in text that I write is something that I do. So
I think, Sarah, for your purposes as a content generator, you're perfectly safe in continuing to work the same way you always have with one H1. That's not going to hurt you in the least. And even after HTML5 is the law of the land, you'd still be fine doing that. They're simply saying, if the situation so dictates, you can use multiple H1s. Okay. For instance, the New York Times or SNC, we can. I love the way I work myself into that same breath with the New York Times. I had to grasp that. We could get away with that, and it might be beneficial. On your run-of-the-mill blog or small e-com word site. Well, an e-com site could also have applications where multiple H1s might be advantageous.
Two things to also consider. Google is part of the W3C, so they know everything that's going on with HTML5.
Oh, sure.
And they do have some people who are doing that level of design, who are doing the advanced design, who are working on, Mark Pilgrim wrote a Dive into HTML5 book that was freely available on the web 2 years ago or so. I'm not sure if it's available now, but he was one of the guys designing the HTML5, and he's a Google employee at this point.
What's his name, Bill?
Mark Pilgrim.
Ah.
He wrote a book that's also no longer available online called Dive into Accessibility. It was really tremendous book about accessibility and how to write to be accessible on the web.
Yeah, I think the first place that I read about video in HTML5 was someone from Google talking about how they would use it and how they were planning to use it on YouTube in the future, that it got rid of all the codecs and all that other baloney. And basically, you don't need a player for HTML5.
Yeah.
Which is that
cool.
lightens the page immensely.
Oh, big time, yeah.
One other thing, Bill, that I just thought of, you made a good point about the headlines on the newspaper and stuff, right?
Yeah.
That made perfect sense. But when you go into the story, right? So you followed the headline and you've gone to the story on an inner page, right? There, I would use the headings a little bit more the old school way.
So the Microsoft patent that was about that block level segmentation
Right.
talked about looking, it would look at parts of a page and see how they differed from each other and try to understand what each part was doing. So a section of a page that was short phrases, all title, case, all links is probably top level navigation. Another section of a page that was all sentences with punctuation was probably content on your page.
Is that the segmentation paper that Microsoft did years and years ago? Is that what
The
you're...
VIPS paper? No, that was like 2003. This was after it. This was a patent that talked about looking at linguistic features to understand the purposes of blocks on a page.
Okay. That's interesting.
And they would try to anticipate which things, what purposes different blocks had on a page. When you had things like newspaper pages where they had photographs that go with each segment, they wanted to make sure that they could identify those photos and those segments and put them together.
Okay.
So if they showed them in search results, they would show them together. You remember when Cool came out and it used to show the wrong images with stories?
Yep.
They didn't want to be another Cool.
So also then you could almost, the way you were talking, if you just did a line with capitalized, right, like you would in a heading, it would probably treat it almost like a heading if it was delineating a block.
Yeah.
Wow, that's even better than using headings, actually. Of course, Microsoft thought of that, my champion.
That was Microsoft Asia. That was Microsoft Research Asia, who isn't Bing.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. That's actual Microsoft, not the search engine that's doing that research.
It's like two different research groups at Microsoft that don't talk to each other.
Probably with good reason. No, I mean, that they don't want one to influence the other.
I think there's some benefit to them talking to each other.
You would think, yeah.
Yeah, if they're all in Asia, there may be a language barrier.
I wrote about a entity concept graph that Microsoft Asia was working on, and the day after I wrote about it, the head of that department started following me in LinkedIn.
You must have said something right, huh?
They understand English.
Oh, yeah, good point. Sorry.
Or they just thought you were very dangerous, Bill.
Maybe.
Yeah, big deal. The NSA follows me.
You just remember to wave at the black helicopters.
There you go.
Well, we're getting close to the top of the hour.
Yeah.
Why don't we go around and let people know where we might be appearing over the next weekend or what we're up to? Tim?
Well, as we were discussing earlier this weekend, I will be at WordCamp San Diego as an attendee, certainly not as a speaker or anything. I'll be there Saturday for sure. I may or may not go on Sunday. And otherwise, the week after that, normal. Sometimes normal is good. nothing special. So
Mm-hmm.
that's it for me.
Terry?
Let me think. Well, hopefully next week I'll be releasing a new dojo site. Pretty near done now. So yeah, I want to do a few experiments. So I'm going to start by releasing the site with no schema on it. And
admin Etsy's page?
then know a lot of things. Event stuff. Because it's for the radio shows that me and Dave are gonna doing, and I'm sure you'll be on quite a few of those. Let's see, and events and video and audio schema. I'm sure they're the same thing. Creative.
Work with the client who had a weekly radio show, and they were doing podcasts with video, and they were putting those up as events in schema on their site, and they were attracting people to those using that.
Very good. I get a chance to test that in some other places too, because for another client, we're going to be opening a community in the next month or so where there'll be events that are taped, and we'll put them up for everyone's use. And that's good to know that I'll set them up as events beforehand. Get people. Yeah, thanks, Bill.
Oh, you're welcome. Doc, about you?
Oh, I've got a couple of quotes I had to send out this morning, so I'm hoping that one of those I'll hope to hear back on today. It should move fairly quickly. The other one I expect is probably going to take a couple of weeks to get their mind made up. But so I hope to be starting up on a new tech audit here this evening. Other than that, just trying to stay busy enough to keep myself out of trouble. That pretty much keeps me busy.
Yeah, I've got to finish up one of those tech audits myself. It's one long line that I've been doing, enjoying them. So
I like them. Yeah, they're fun. Almost every one I do, I find something that kind of cocks one eyebrow. You know, oh, there's a surprise, or I've never seen that before, or you actually learn something new. You know, different ways to break things. I have one client who I think really should be writing books on how to break websites, because he seems to have cornered the market on it. I get an average of about 3 calls a month where he's gone in there and managed to break something.
You always see something you don't quite expect.
I've threatened to pull his admin privileges and just make him a contributor.
Back it up.
Oh, hourly.
Hourly.
Raise the rate.
I did that about 6 months ago.
Time to do it again.
Yeah. This guy's unbelievable. I said, you know, anybody that goes through their 15th head-on collision would realize they don't know how to drive and stop trying. He says, not me. Yeah, I noticed that about you. Love the guy, but wow.
Well, that's the end of our show, everybody. Take care now. Have a good week. We'll see you next week.
Bye all.
Bye-bye.